Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
Yes. So it's 10 minutes after 9. And then today, we'll be having the session for today will be on, and the presenter will be Professor Charles Assuah. I would want to plead with Professor Kankam to welcome us so that we can begin this session.
Thank you, Dr. Tamanja. My colleague, professors, and my graduate students, especially good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning.
I have said time and again that we are more than privileged to have these graduate sessions, which is meant to equip us with the needed skills and competencies to enable us conduct research and, more importantly, to help us write our thesis. I'm excited about the number of participants we usually have on the program. As I welcome you now, I can see we have about 40 students, and I hope that as the session progresses, the number will increase. I entreat all of us to take this session seriously so that we contribute and follow the presenter closely, so that by the end of the session, all of us would have acquired the needed knowledge, skills, and the competencies that we need to enable us conduct research. And on that note, I say I welcome you all on behalf of our great professor, Professor Anamwa Mensah, and on behalf of the School of Graduate Studies. You are most welcome. The presenter is Professor Charles Assuah, who thankfully and happily the Vice Dean, School of Graduate Studies. Professor Assuah, you are most welcome.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Tamanja.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your welcome address.
Thank you so much.
For the participants, Professor Assuah is a senior colleague of us here. In fact, he is the right person for this particular presentation today, because not only is he a PhD in mathematics holder, but he's also the Vice Dean of Graduate Studies. And so anything that has to do with studies or PhD work or graduate studies, he has the answers for you. And he's going to blend that experience with his many years and vast experience of teaching mathematics education and mentoring students. So since we have already displayed his profile on the net and we are about 40 minutes into time, I just want to welcome Professor Assuah to lead the facilitation. The numbers will increase though, but for now we have 45 who have joined us. So Professor Assuah, the floor is yours.
Okay, Dr. Manja, thank you so much for your kind introduction. I also want to welcome the Dean of the Graduate School, Prof. Kankam, for his introduction as well. Colleagues and students, you are all welcome. Join me as we all go through the journey of quantitative research methods. Well, I want to begin with a specific definition. And this definition will indeed guide us through what I will be presenting this morning. It says that a type of educational research, by the way, that is what quantitative research methods means. It's a type of educational research in which the researcher decides what to study, asks specific narrow questions, collects quantifiable data from participants, analyzes these numbers using statistics, and conducts the inquiry in an unbiased, objective manner. So anytime that we are dealing with quantifiable data, numbers. It could be even an interview that is structured, observation that is structured. Once we have assigned some numbers and meaning to that, then you can apply statistics in solving it. So basically, what we'll be going through today will expose us to some basic statistics as we go along. Quantitative research method emphasizes on collecting, analyzing information in the form of numbers, as I said. If we are dealing with scores, it could measure distinct attributes of individuals and organizations. Then, when you're talking about procedures, we'll also be comparing groups or relating factors about individuals or groups in experiments. We can also talk about correlational studies. In correlational studies, we would have two continuous variables. It could be more, but for purposes of this presentation, I will limit it to two continuous variables, one on X, one on Y, and one depending on the other. If the correlation becomes so significant, we say we are dealing with a correlational study. In the same way, we can also apply this one in surveys. We want to look at characteristics of quantitative research methods. On the left-hand side, we have quantitative characteristics, and on the right-hand side, we have steps in the research process. The first thing that we notice that it is descriptive and it's explanatory. Explanatory in the sense that quantitative research normally asks questions like why? Because if you ask such questions, then you may have to gather the data, to be able to answer those type of questions. Then you should be able to justify the problem, and that's why the problem statement is very, very vital in quantitative studies. It needs emphasizing that without a problem statement, there will not be any need for any quantitative study. And in a moment, I will take all of us through the process of writing a very good problem statement. Then also, we should be very specific and narrow, talking about the problem and the purpose. Then the problem statement should also be very measurable. The instruments that we use are always numeric. Numeric in the sense that because we are saying that we are dealing with numbers, and the larger the numbers, the better. The larger the numbers, the better, because if you have very good samples, greater than 30, there is a theorem we call, and I'm sure most of you are aware, we call the central limit theorem. The central limit theorem gives us the justification that when the sample size is very, very large, then the sample distribution of the sample means becomes normal, and therefore we don't have any problem at all. We'll be able to use that data to do our computations. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to use statistics, so statistical method to do our analysis and so on. And then normally we are looking at trends. We'll be comparing, we'll be predicting in an objective and an unbiased manner. It should be very, very objective in our reportage, in the way we report. But the steps in the process are as follows. First of all, you should be able to identify a problem. And as we go along, there are means that we can use to identify research problems. Then we review the literature. We specify a purpose. Then within the purpose, you can also have your objectives, then your research questions, right? Once we have the objectives research questions, then we collect data, analyze and interpret the data, and report and evaluate. So these are the quantitative characteristics in the research process. Colleagues, students, quantitative research begins with identifying a problem. You identify the problem. Without the problem, there will not be any need for the research. I would say that the problem statement is the most important aspect of the whole research process, because it is the problem that warrants us to use all the methods that we'll be referring to. So the problem statement is the rationale why we are conducting this research, the rationale behind this research. That is why it is important to state it accordingly and clearly. Anytime that there is a problem, then there is a possibility for empirical investigation. Empirical investigation means then experimentally we will be able to gather data and do analysis and report. A research problem is formally stated to indicate evidence-based inquiry. Evidence-based inquiry experimentation, then we gather data to answer that. We have two types of research processes, We have basic research and experimental. For basic research, it could lead or resolve any inconsistency in results of past studies and extend research of a theoretical foundation. So just as we go on, there are some researchers or scholars, they are very much interested in basic research. But the findings do not directly answer or solve problems that confront us as humans. We call that type of research basic research, and we have it applied. It involves solving a social problem or a psychological disorder. For example, we should be able to understand that and we should be able to relate what we are doing to previous work in the area. Then we should be able to ask ourselves if other aspects of the studies have previously been known. Does the study build on an earlier study? When research is driven by the desire to resolve controversial issues, all sides in the debate should be represented in a balanced manner. And here I would advise my students, fellow students, students joining, that they should be mindful that when they are writing the problem statement, once they have stated it, the other side that they do not also know should also be discussed. So that we should be able to, if it's actually resolving a controversial issue, we will see it in that light. Sometimes the advantages must be discussed. Then you as well discuss the disadvantages. Very, very important. The problem statement should be written like that readers do not or are not kept in suspense. Sometimes you read someone's problem statement and you even think if it's a problem, you don't even know to make head and tail out of it. As I said earlier, the problem statement is the most important thing about the whole research process. And time, resource should be put into it to write it so clearly. The problem statement should indicate the educational context and significance of the problem. So the educational context and the significance of the problem should be embedded in the problem statement. It should provide a framework for reporting the conclusions. It is also very instructive to note that research problems are stated before data collection begins in a quantitative study. You state the problem, you state the research questions before data collection begins. This is slightly different from qualitative. We must note that. There are some few things that we need to know that in selecting our construct variables and operational definitions are also very, very important in quantitative study. To be able to determine a powerful construct of variables, it should come from the theory. That's why literature review is very, very important. If we were doing a study, and sometimes I ask students, how many peer-reviewed journals have you read in the area you have selected? And the students fumble. Oh, sir, I only read a few. You should be very, very conversant with that area. Once you're able to read around that area, then you understand the construct, the variables, and the operational definitions that you assign in your work. A construct is a complex abstraction which is not easily or directly observable. For example, intelligence. There is no way anybody can say this is intelligence, but there are certain factors that when they are in place, it will lead to intelligence. In other words, there are some variables, combination of certain variables that will give birth to intelligence, to self-concept, to understanding, for example. All these variables are what we call latent variables. Latent because they are hidden, but we have to try as much as possible to unearth them using statistics. Variables may be categorical or continuous. And then if we talk about a continuous variable, there are no breaks. For example, weight is a continuous variable. Height is a continuous variable. Scores are continuous variable. Then you have categorical variable. For example, gender is a categorical variable. SES is a continuous variable. Political affiliation, it's a categorical variable because we have very specific categories. For example, if you look at political affiliation, for instance, you can see NPP, NDC, CPP. They are various distinct categories. That's why it's a categorical variable. It could also be dependent, independent, manipulated, experimental, predictor, or criterion variables in different designs. Two types of variables that are so important that I will mention: dependent and independent variables. The dependent variable is the measure that we get as a result of the manipulation. We get the measure that we want from the independent variable. Let me give you an example. We have university, we have UEW, then we have UCC. The university there is the independent variable, all right? And when we measure, as a result, when we have given them a standardized exams, then we take their scores based on the scores for UCC and scores for UEW, then we have our dependent variable. In other words, the performance depends on the type of university. That's why the university is the independent, and the scores that we get is what our dependent variable. Should also, an operational definition assigns meaning a variable by specifying the activities or operations necessary to measure, categorize, or manipulate. Another variable that is also very important is the variable that we can manipulate. And the variable that we can manipulate, we can change, is the independent variable. How do we write a problem statement, students? That is a trick that I will give you. There are a lot of tricks. That is a trick that I will give you. First of all, what we know about the problem, what we don't know about the problem, and what they want us to know. If you're able to remember this, we'll be able to write a very powerful problem statement. What we know, you have read it. By the way, the problem is not a problem that appeals to you alone. The problem should appeal to the international community, the local community as well. So once the problem is, what do we know about the problem? You state it succinctly. As I mentioned, the flip side should also be discussed. What we don't know should also be discussed. And then, what researchers, because researchers are also interested in our work. Because when we have finished a research study and it's on a shelf, other scholars, other students, other colleagues read it as well. And so they should also be interested. That's why, what do researchers want us to find? Still on the writing of the problem statement, begin this way. Each paragraph should start with a logical statement, telling us what the paragraph is about. For example, numerous researchers have studied the effectiveness of using cooperative learning by teachers to overcome students' difficulties in understanding circle theorem. So I put 3 citations because we are all in the global society. Whatever you do in research, you have to, that's what we call scaffolding. Other people have done something similar related to your study. So you cite. If you know the source, please, I'm not referring to vague propositions. That's why it's important for all of us to do thorough reading of the literature so that as soon as we're able to cite accordingly or give reference, then it's an important step. Each citation should be multiple citations showing multiple authors. Then we should showcase our synthesis. Remember, I'm dwelling so much time on the problem statement because to me, the problem statement is the most important aspect of the whole research process. You need to narrow down so that when someone reads it, the person understands you so clearly. Research problem is very, very significant when it is in developing theory, knowledge, or practice. And then the significance increases when several reasons can be provided to justify the inquiry. That's why when you are doing a study, once again, I'm referring to the literature. Read it. If you are doing an MPhil, I expect you to read about 15 articles related to your study. If you are doing a PhD, then extend it to about 20, 25. Take time to read and synthesize the information very well. And then you should be able to justify the following criteria, whether the study provides knowledge about an enduring practice, a theory, or is it generalizable? The significance of the problem is also very, very important. You state it. You state it such that, does it extend understanding of a broader phenomenon? Does it advance methodology? Is it related to current issue? Or is it an exploratory study that you want to find out about why certain things occur? Actually, the significance of the problem is a rationale for the study. And it actually justifies why we are using evidence-based inquiry and why we think that evidence-based inquiry is so important and why you have selected a particular choice, a particular of a particular problem. Then the research requires knowledge, skills, planning, time, and physical resources. If we are going into research, these are the things that we need to pay close attention to, because it requires knowledge. You have to plan. It requires skills. It requires time. It requires physical resources as well. Want to look at where we can get problems, sources of problems, by casual observation as we go along, as you go around the schools and teachers teach. You'll be able to realize that just by casual, if a lesson is not well delivered, you should be able to know. Then you can also arrive at a problem. You deduce that from theory. That's why some scholars do. They look at the theories that we have, and that scholar or researcher will be able to deduce or come out with a research problem. And then once you read thoroughly the literature, you should be able to find problems. Then when you're able to follow current social and political issues, you should be able to identify problems. Your experience and insight can give birth to a problem. Ladies and gentlemen, once we have the problem, then there is a need for us to set our research questions. The first research question that we're going to consider here is the descriptive research questions. It typically asks question, what is? What is? And normally we haven't come to that, we'll come to that. It warrants the use of a survey research design. An example is, what is the achievement level of grade 4 pupils on the standardized test? This is a research question. And it is descriptive in nature, the way it is stated. Another one is, what does the staff perceive as the most important instructional needs? They'll perceive by describing. And that is the first type of research questions that we'll consider. Another type of research question, the type is the relationship research questions. It flows like this. A relationship question asks, what is the relationship between two or more variables? And implies a correlational design. Right? An example is, does self-concept relate to achievement? It's purely a research question. Colleagues, students, it is also instructive to note that when we are setting the research question, it should be so clear. We should state it so clearly, so that, and explicitly, so that nobody becomes confused. If somebody becomes confused, then the person may not even know, is it a difference question? Is it a correlational question? What type of question? Is a question going to predict anything? That's why the setting of the risk questions are very, very important. Another thing to note about correlation is that when correlation is significant, you can't say that it leads to causation. All right? In other words, correlation doesn't lead to causality. Let me give you an example. If students study so many hours, it will improve their learning. It does not mean that every student who studies so many hours will definitely improve. It doesn't work that way. statistically, the meaning is that there is a third variable principle, a third variable factor that's actually bringing about that change. So that's why we are saying that anytime that there is relationship leading to correlation, that inference should not be made. A difference question typically asks, is there a difference between two groups or two or more treatments? This type of question are posed when the study compares two or more observations. For example, is there a difference between two or more observations? Are there significant differences in student affective learning between traditional classroom learning and instruction through a game or through stimulation? See, the questions that I've posed are so explicit. Therefore, if I'm doing a difference question, and then I state it so explicitly, when I'm coming to answer that question, I'll know the statistical tool to use so that nobody becomes confused. Mind you, what we are doing, our eyes are on the problem statement and at the same time on the research questions. Our eyes are on the problem statement, on the research questions, so that we don't deviate. That is the most important aspect of this. In a difference question, the difference lies, if in a different question, for example, the direction which the different lies can be predicted, then if you can predict the direction, then you can state it like this. Is there a difference in pre-test and post-test scores? Is there a mastery, greater mastery of reading comprehension on the post-test? Then you indicate the direction. One important thing to note is also the use of a hypothesis. Hypothesis is a tentative statement of the expected relationship between two or more variables. Colleagues, sometimes it's not always the case that you can have research questions and you write a hypothesis as well. Because actually it's the same research question that you are transforming into hypothesis. That's why we say a hypothesis is a tentative statement. So some scholars will say, when you write a research question and it's quantitative, don't bring hypothesis. People would say, don't bring research questions, but rather hypothesis. Both of them, because it's the hypothesis that statistically you want to prove whether it's true or false. And it has a direct relationship with the research questions. So basically, for hypothesis, we have a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. But the alternative hypothesis is what we call the research hypothesis. That is why you want to prove, in order to show that there is an effect as a result of the manipulation or intervention that you would like to provide. So, well, you can use both of them. You have your research questions. If it's a difference question, you have to state the hypothesis accordingly. There is no statistical difference. There is a statistical difference. Then everyone knows that you are dealing with a difference type of question. Talked about this. So. Say that a hypothesis should be testable. Hypothesis should be verifiable. Hypothesis is of two types, the null and the alternative. And the null predicts, or the null says that there is no difference. And the alternative says that there is a difference, there is an effect. The null says that there is no relationship. The alternative says that there is actually is the alternative hypothesis That's why we are actually conducting this research, and we call it the research hypothesis. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, remember I said that in conducting any research study, your eyes should always be on the problem so that you don't miss it and the research questions. Once you have the research questions, then you have the problem statement very well sorted out. Another thing that is so important is the research design. The research design is the overall plan or structure of the research. It indicates what type of research is planned and what kinds of results are expected from the research. An analogy I can give is somebody planning to put up a building. For example, you want to put up a high-rise building. So certainly you have to go and see an architect to help you out. As you go to the architect will ask you, what type of building do you intend to build? And you tell the architect, I want to build a two-story building. A two-story building. Then the architect draws the plan for you. The architect draws the plan. So before you tell the architect will not be able to know the type of building that is supposed to be built. The same applies to this. The research questions and the problem statement will determine the design. So we have to be mindful of that. We don't just choose anything at all. That's why sometimes if you are reading any research paper, your eyes are always on the problem statement, your eyes are on the research questions, then you go and look at the design. What type of design do I need to be able to answer thoroughly the research questions? These are very, very, very important things to consider. Now, in this presentation, the definition of my research design doesn't include the research methods. In other words, I haven't included the methods of data collection and data analysis. Although some scholars, when you talk about the research design, they include all of them, but others don't. I go with others who do not. And to me, it makes sense to me. The design is the overall plan or structure of the research. It indicates what type of research is planned and what kinds of results are expected. It's different from the methods of data collection. In other words, the design depends on the research questions and the problem, and the methods of data collection depends on the design. That should be well understood. The main function of the research is to make sure that the information gathered through the research answers the question unambiguously. That's what I'm saying. Always our eyes are on the problem and the research question. Students, I would take you through the type of designs. The designs that we have are not restricted to what we have, but this is an introductory research method. And so as we go along, we'll be learning others as well. We have the experimental, then we have the non-experimental designs, the overall structure. Under the experimental, you have a true experimental, you have the quasi experimental, you have the single subject, then you have the factorial design. Under the non-experimental, you have the descriptive, you have the comparative, you have correlational, you have survey, then you have post facto design. In experimental designs, the researcher manipulates what the participants will experience. Remember, I was using this about the university, UCC, UW. When we are relating that to standardized course, certainly, then we have to try to manipulate our independent variable to see that if there are effects on the dependent. So we have to manipulate. Then the investigator or the researcher has control over what happens to the participants, because you can manipulate, you can control certain variables. You can withhold specific interventions. Through experimental design, a characteristic is that there is no random assignment of participants to groups. If you have two groups, there is random assignment. Random assignment, you are doing the study such that you have two groups, and if you have a group of students, you have to randomly assign the student to the groups. You don't use intact classes in the true experimental. Then another characteristic is that every student has an equal chance of being in each group. And there is also manipulation and control. You can control such that if there is an effect, then you say that is due to that effect and nothing else. There is a way or a process to be able to conduct such research. And we have the quasi-experimental. There is no random assignment of participants to the groups. Remember, I said in the true experimental, there is random assignment. In the quasi-experimental, there is no, we use something we call intact classes or intact groups without randomization. However, we can manipulate the independent variable, we can manipulate it, and to some extent, we can control. And we can also have a single subject design. It investigates the causal relationship between a factor and the behavior of a single individual. The causal relationship between a factor, you can call it a factor here, can be an independent variable, and the behavior of a single, it deals with a single individual. Anytime that we are dealing with a single subject design, we are referring to an individual. Another thing that we can talk about is the factorial design. It investigates the effects of one or more independent variables on one dependent variable. You can have, you can have two or more independent variables. Then you ask yourself, how do they influence the dependent variable? This type of design can be used in something like an ANOVA. For example, if you have two independent variables affecting a dependent variable, then the design can be a 2x2 factorial ANOVA. If you have three independent variables affecting a dependent variable or influencing a dependent variable, then say you can have a 2, and if they are all on two levels, then you can say a 2x2 factorial ANOVA. Then you mention the design. But this study is not often used by students. This design, sorry. We look at the non-experimental research. In non-experimental research, there is no direct control over causation. Natural occurring phenomena is under study. So we don't go in there to do any manipulation at all. They can be classified as descriptive, comparative, correlational, survey, ex post facto. And a form of descriptive research using descriptive design simply provides a summary of an existing phenomenon by using numbers to characterize individuals or groups. Then it assesses the nature of existing conditions. Its main purpose is limited to characterizing something as it is. Comparative, the researcher investigates whether there is a difference between two or more groups. Remember, we are not doing any manipulation, right? We are not doing any manipulation as it is in the population or in the sample. We are not manipulating anything. Rather than simply describe people's attitude towards discipline, a comparative study could investigate whether attitudes differed at grade level or gender. You can use it to compare the grades of athletes and non-athletes, two groups. Often comparative modes of inquiry are used to study relationships between participation in athletics and grade point average. You can also have a correlational study concerned with assessing relationship between two or more phenomena. As I said earlier on, if there is a relationship, the relationship is only a measure of the association, but does not lead to causality. That should be stressed. It does not lead to causality. And so you can have a positive correlation, meaning that high values of one variable are associated with high values of a second variable. Then you can have a negative correlation, meaning that high values of one variable are associated with low values of a second variable. Survey design. An investigator or researcher selects a sample of participants from the population and administers a questionnaire or conducts interview to collect data. In fact, we use a questionnaire. If you use a questionnaire to gather data, you can gather data to describe attitudes, opinions, behaviors, or characteristics of the population. Surveys are also used to assess trends that be used for follow-up analysis. Another thing that we look at, non-experimental, the ex post facto design. And the meaning is that it's used to explore possible causal relations among variables that cannot be manipulated by the researcher. There are some variables that no matter what you do, you will not be able to manipulate. And the second bullet, the researcher designs the study to compare two or more samples that are comparable, except for a specified factor. That's what we call an ex post facto design. Then we look at, remember I said in my presentation, I'm looking at the design separate from the research methods. I'm not combining all of them. And so in that case, I will define the research methods. We have research design and methods. They are the various processes, procedures, and tools used to collect and analyze data. They are influenced by the research design. So we have the design depending. The design is being influenced by the problem and the research questions. And the methods that we select also depend on the design. I hope I'm making sense here. And we are saying that they are the various processes, procedures, and tools used to collect and analyze data. They are influenced by the research design. Another important thing to understand when we are going by the quantitative method is to understand the scales of measurement. And the scales of measurement are 4 parts. We have the nominal, we have the ordinal, then we have the interval, then we have the ratio. Remember, we are referring to the data collection procedure. That's at this stage, that's where we are. Then the scale, it has got its characteristics. Then I'll give you some examples. Then statistics to look for when we are applying that. The first scale is a nominal scale. Then what it does is that it's numbers that we assign do not mean anything. The numbers that we assign differentiates between or among the categories. An example is gender, for example. If we are conducting a study, then we say male equals 0, and then female equals 1. The numbers do not mean anything. It's a form of differentiation. Another example you can give here is political party, for example. 1, NPP, 2, NDC, 3, CPP, and so on. The numbers do not mean anything. And so I'm surprised to see students, even at a nominal scale, they begin to do complicated statistics, which is not correct at all. The best they can look for is to look at frequencies, frequency count mode. They can do that using the nominal. Then we advance further because we have to exhaust on the scale of the scales of measurement, all the 4 types of scales. Then one thing that you have to realize is that under the ordinal, it's also in categories as well, but there is an order. An example can be given in a marathon race. In the marathon race, somebody's going to be first, second, third in that order. But the intervals in which they complete are not the same. There is order, first, second, third, fourth, but the interval. So one thing that we have to realize that we have distinct categories, and there is also order as well. An example is a Likert scale, social class. For example, the Likert scale where we have strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. Then we have the social class. Social class, we are referring to the SES, the lower class, middle class, upper class. When you have a scale like that as your measurement tool, then the median and the mode becomes handy. Then you extend it to the interval scale. It's in categories, there is order, and the intervals are well spaced. However, there is no absolute 0 within that interval. There is no absolute 0. An example is the IQ. If someone's IQ is 0, the 0 is, but that measure says that is 0. That doesn't mean that most statistical procedures can be performed in the interval scale, using the interval scale. And the last one, and the most important one, is the ratio. The ratio, form of differentiation, there is order, the intervals are well spaced, and there is absolute 0. If we say absolute 0 here, the real absence of the substance. The real absence of the substance. If it is 0, then it's not there. I haven't seen someone, if someone's height is 0, it doesn't even describe it. It means that if your weight is 0, your weight is 0. That is what it means. And we can look at that in the Kelvin scale, weight, height, scores, time, speed. And most statistical procedures can be performed. Complicated statistical procedures can be performed using the interval and the ratio scale. That should be well understood. Another way we can gather quantitative data, only if the interviews are structured, you can use interviews. But you have to make sure that the interviews are structured, not unstructured interview. If it's structured, where you can assign numbers. You can then surveys and questionnaires, observations, and document review. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about instrumentation. The instrumentation enables us to gather our data. But before we do that, it needs to be valid. If it is valid, it measures what it's supposed to measure. Validity comes before reliability. If it is valid, then we talk about reliability. The reliability means the consistency of the instrument to produce similar results. If it is used in Togo, then it is used in Ghana within the same context, then we should be able to produce similar results. Researchers should locate existing instruments, if possible, before developing their own. We call it already validated instruments are very good to use because they have been used widely in many jurisdictions. So that if you have that instrument, then you make some modifications slightly. It's better than using your own. However, you can still use your own, but you have to go through a lot of protocols by way of looking at factor analysis, make sure that you pilot it. That's why some people suggest, or scholars suggest, that you could use existing instruments in your study. In conclusion, we have talked about quantitative research methods. Remember, what I've done in this presentation, I haven't approached any data analysis technique. It's just the methods that I've gone through. And I started by saying that the most important thing is the problem statement. Once you have the problem statement, then you should have your research questions. Then the research questions will determine the design that you are going to use. And the design also informs you on the methods of data collection, procedure, and the others would follow. I want to end here. I want to thank all of you, and I welcome questions from you. Thank you so much.
All right, Prof. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. Indeed, like you said, there will be another session on quantitative data analysis.
Yeah.
So we appreciate the broad understanding that you have given us. We will have another session where we'll zero in on only data analysis, quantitative data analysis, and another session on qualitative data analysis. So I think that you have delivered within what is expected of you today. So thank you so very much. Maybe you will take some 1 minute to sip some water, and then we get to some of the issues that the students may want to ask questions. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Maybe you need a minute or two to sip some water. Since we've been talking for about almost 1.5 hours now, so that we'll now take some of the concerns from the participants.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. So, Prof, there is a concern here.
Okay.
Francis says that you said the variables for quantitative research may be categorical or continuous. I think the quantitative research variables may be discrete or continuous. So he's asking whether categorical, but I think that can also be discrete or continuous. And says that categorical falls under quantitative research. This may be. So he's just asking whether you mean discrete or categorical.
Okay. Probably I should have added. We have discrete, then we have categorical, then we have continuous. The categorical that I mentioned it's something like a political affiliation, SES, are the mathematical variables as are used in something like the binomial, the accounts, okay? So he's right. If he adds the discrete as well, but categorical is not in qualitative. Categorical can also be, because in the predictors even in quantitative, you can use categorical variables as well, feed them in, but you have to know how to look at them. So he's right, but the discrete should have been included.
Okay. So Bright says, thank you, Prof, for the down-to-earth explanations. Question, please, should both types of hypothesis be stated all the time in writing one's hypothesis? If no, which should be stated?
Okay. All right. Remember, what's the gentleman's name, Francis?
His Bright,
Francis. Bright.
Yeah.
I said that, first of all, we have to start with from the research questions. And I said that the hypothesis is a testable statement. Oh, by the way, the hypothesis and the research questions are the same. They are the same. Other scholars prefer research questions without hypothesis. Others also want just the hypothesis, even without the research question. And some prefer both of them. But if you state the null and the alternative, it doesn't mean, it doesn't spoil anything. You can do that. But ideally, the most important hypothesis to set is the alternative, what we call the research hypothesis. That should be the one that should be stated.
Okay, thank you, Prof. There's another question from Kobina Ameher. Says, Prof, please, how would you describe or classify a design that uses intact classes, where the choice of the control or experimental group is done randomly?
Hello, Prof.
Hello,
Doc,
Prof.
How
would you describe or classify a design that uses intact classes, where the choice of the control or experimental group is done randomly?
The choice of the control
or experimental group is done randomly, and he's put a randomly.
Okay, that remember, let me explain. Normally, if participants, right, we have groups, maybe two groups, we have experimental, we have control, and participants are randomly assigned to both the control and experimental. That is what we call a true experimental design. But if you use, anytime you use intact classes, no matter how you're able to assign your control and experimental, it's still a quasi-experimental design.
Karen Atta says, Prof, if a researcher has a questionnaire that contains nominal data questions, is there a need for pre-testing to check for reliability and validity?
Let me, I started by saying that the nominal data does not mean anything. Is that right? The nominal is a form of differentiation, and that part shouldn't be part of even computing the reliability, for instance. So, out of those numbers, it's a form of differentiation for you to say that males are this number, females are this number, that is it. So you can do the piloting, but the most important thing about piloting, where you are calculating, say, your reliability, so that you look at it and begin to make some changes, then the nominal data will not make any contribution. The nominal data, remember, is the lowest on the scale. It doesn't mean it. That's why I said you can only use that to do frequency count, nothing else.
Okay. This is from Godwin. It says, Prof, please with regards to the scale of measurement and taking into consideration ordinal scale, is it all test items on the Likert scale that we use ordinal scale?
Ordinal. Prof, Doc, will you come again?
I think his
the question is not very clear to me.
It's not well framed. He said that, please, with relevance to the scale of measurement, I think he wants to say that with regard to scale of measurement and taking into consideration ordinal scale, is it all test items on the Likert scale that we use ordinal scale? I think his question is very
Okay. Let me put it this way. Any time that a student uses a Likert scale data, a Likert scale, then it's ordinal. Any time a student uses a Likert scale, whether a 5-point, a 3-point, a 7-point, a 9-point scale, and it's a Likert scale, it's an ordinal scale. That's all that I'll say about that.
Okay. Emmanuel Bafo, I guess, says that, Prof, what are some of the reasons for lack of randomization or other conditions to qualify to be called quasi-experimental?
Okay. One thing that is best is to do true experimental design, where we randomly assign participants into the groups, the treatment and the control. But it's not always the case that that is feasible. It's not always the case that is feasible. That's why they insert classes. Okay, but all of these designs also have their advantages and disadvantages, what we call the threats to internal and external validity. There are threats within that. So when randomization is not accomplished or followed through, then we will refer that one to be interclasses, where that is what we call the quasi-experimental. And it has got this associated internal and external validity. I haven't mentioned that because, this presentation will not be able to exhaust everything about research methods, but at least the most important things about research methods is what I've touched on.
Okay. So Amos says, thank you, Prof. Kobina says, thank you, Prof, for the presentation. God bless you. Reverend Joyce Odro says, very insightful presentation. Bless you, Prof. And thank you, Prof. Charles and the team. Godfred says, thank you, Prof, for the insightful presentation. Reverend Joyce Odro says, very insightful presentation. God bless you, Prof. Assuah. So, a lot of commendation for your presentation.
Well,
somebody's asking, yes, is case study a research design or a type of research?
Right. A case study is a research design. But I didn't touch on case study because I'm dealing with quantitative, and case study is a qualitative research design. That's why I didn't touch on a case study at all.
Say, Prof, please, where do we bring in the research philosophy in the design?
Right. The research philosophy is very, very important. I didn't touch on this in this presentation, but when you are doing a thesis, for example, it's found in chapter 3. You just have to be able to explain your philosophical underpinning your philosophical orientation towards that particular work. And there is a process, a formula for doing that. But for the sake of this presentation, I didn't touch on that one. But when you are writing your thesis, your supervisors will guide you so that you'll be able to select an appropriate theoretical underpinning for your study.
Somebody says that, please, I said, Prof, thank you so much for the lecture.
Yeah.
Please, I want more clarification on the research questions and hypothesis. Says that should we always hypothesize from the research questions, or it can stand on its own?
Yeah.
He says that
okay.
another question is, how many research questions can one state when doing an experimental research study?
Okay, thank you so much. You know, quantitative research questions, as I said, should be explicitly stated. Are there statistical difference between student performance, male student performance and female student performance on the standardized test? That is explicitly stated. Then I look at that, I should be able to convert that research question in as there are no difference between them. Then the alternative says that there is a difference between them. But you see that they have something in common. That's why it shouldn't be standalone. After all, is that the research questions are the main reasons why you are doing the study. It's not a hypothesis, but the hypothesis is aiding you to answer the research questions because you are using statistics. That's why I said from the outset that your eyes should always be on the problem in the research questions. So once your eyes are on the problem in the research questions, you would be able to formulate an appropriate hypothesis so that you don't deviate at all. So you do an objective study. So the hypothesis is sometimes the research questions that has been transformed into a hypothesis.
Okay, somebody wants to know where they can have access to the slides. Usually we upload them on YouTube, so the link will be provided you by the IT departments. Joanna says, please, Prof, if a researcher is administering a structured questionnaire by reading to the respondents because they cannot read and record, can we say this method is interview?
Well, the participant cannot read and write. Is that not so?
Yes.
And then the interview is structured. It's an interview. Why isn't it an interview? It's an interview because you have done it such that, by the way, you should be able to make a difference between a structured and unstructured. If it is structured, there is a limit. You know exactly what you want in the interview. And you know, the way I included that one as part of data collection is that then, for example, if a participant says this or does that, then because it's structured, you can say then a number 4 or a mark 4 can be given. A mark 3 can be given, all right? But you have said that in this particular case, the participant can read or write. It has got ethical issues that needs to be cleared. And that one, when you are conducting a study, you need to be really, really careful so that you will not be doing that study for the participants. You want to hear that what they are representing is really, really what they intend to give you. So that is a bit complicated, but it's doable.
Somebody wants to know the distinct classification between qualitative and quantitative research. Because
the person wants to know The distinct classification.
Classification, yes.
Okay.
Of qualitative and quantitative research.
One distinct classification is that for the quantitative research methods, we have to finish with our problem and the research questions before we start thinking of the data collection. So for the quantitative, the problem statement, remember I said, is the most important. And then the research questions, we have to finish that. You can go and relax for about 3 days, 4 days, 1 week. Then we think of the data collection. That is a bit different in the qualitative. The qualitative, I'm sure both of them can go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Hand in hand. And then also another distinction is that, remember, what today is purely using numbers. Quantitative is not the case. Data analyzed to arrive at themes. So it's purely interview-driven data, which is different from this one. Text. We have to look at the main distinctions. These are the distinctions that at least I can tell you for the moment.
Okay, I think you have answered this, but it says that, please, is it compulsory to develop hypotheses in every quantitative study?
Thank you so much, Doc. Remember, I said that sometimes you need to discuss that with your supervisor. Remember, I said that the research question can easily be transformed into hypothesis. Some scholars would only want research questions because it can be inferred. The hypothesis can easily be inferred from the research question. Others also want hypothesis because from hypothesis, they can also translate that into research questions easily. Others also want both of them to appear. So you have to discuss that. If it's a thesis, for instance, then you are working with your supervisor. And the best thing to do is that, supervisor, what is the way to go?
Okay, Prof, Isaac is asking, can we use quantitative research method when conducting a research on improving conceptual understanding of scientific phenomena?
Yes, why not? See, once you identify the problem, for example, what that student intends to do, I do not even know some of the research questions. If he can tell us some of the research questions that he intends to answer, then we will know that he should follow quantitative research methods. But as of now, if you look at the topic and the purpose per se, it will be very difficult to decide. Very difficult to decide.
It says, Prof, please, can you use more than one research design in a study? This is from Eric.
Well, as far as I know, we've always been using one specific design. You can't combine a lot of designs. You have to look at one design that, remember I said the research questions would influence the design. So you look at the research questions, and that's why the research question that we even pose or ask, it should be within the purpose of the study. You can't just wake up and say, okay, today, no matter what it is this type of research question that I want to answer, and it has no bearing on any of them. All the research questions should flow together so that when you select a design, it will appropriately answer those research questions. So my question is that, my answer is that, please try as much as possible to select one design. You can't go with several designs. Just select and you'll be okay.
Okay. Francis Ochiri says, thanks, Prof, for your presentation. Please, can you throw more light on the nominal and ordinal scale of measurement with
Okay.
Hey, Francis.
Okay, Francis. You know, we have the nominal scale. Then the next one above the nominal is the ordinal. Look at the distinction here. The nominal, the numbers that we use is a form of differentiation and nothing else. For example, let us look at political party. Then we have NDC 1, NPP 2, CPP 3, PPP 4, NDP 5. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a form of differentiation and nothing else. Then we come down to the ordinal. The ordinal scale is a form of differentiation, first of all, and there must be order on a certain scale. Then I gave you an example like the Likert scale, for example. If you have strongly disagree, then you move to disagree, you move to neutral, then you move to strongly agree, then you go to strongly agree. The strongly agree is higher on the scale than the neutral. However, the intervals that you see, they are not the same. So there is order. In other words, the ranks, you can see that the strongly agree is higher than the agree. Then the neutral is also higher than the strongly disagree. That one is accepted in order. But there is also a form of differentiation. That is a distinction between them.
I think it's also similar to athletes. When people perform in a competition, right, you have somebody who has come first, second, third, in that order. Exactly. But then the interval between the first and the second and third may not be uniform.
That is right. That's right, Doc. That's it. That's it.
Cecil is saying that Tuesday is becoming my favorite day because of these webinars. Thank you, Iris. Another insightful presentation. Somebody, Isaac says, thank you, Prof. Amos is in doing a quantitative study, what sample size is deemed enough?
Okay, thank you so much. You know, let me explain this, Enoch. You know, most quantitative study that we have, so long as you have something we call a representative sample, and then the population is very, very important. The population that you select your sample, if it is a normal population, sometimes the sample size can even be less than 30, then you get it right. But the population that we sample from is not always normal. Sometimes it can be an inverted U, the population, and sometimes it can be flat. So ideally, if you are going, so long as the scale of measurement that you are selecting is either interval or ratio, and so long as the sample size is at least 30, maybe 30 or more, 50, 100, then you can use a quantitative statistical technique to look at what you want. I hope I've answered you, Francis.
Okay,
At
so
least, but try to be very, very conservative. You just go by, say, 50, 100. Say, but statistically, what they're saying is at least 30. Because if it is 30, then the sampling distribution of the sample means tends to normal. And whatever you want to do, you can use it to describe the population.
Okay, Kenneth says that I am truly grateful by the presentation. May every resource lost be replenished in 1,000-fold. Thank you for being the reason I have smiled this morning. Oh, wow. Great, Prof. At least you have made somebody smile this morning. And another person is asking, Prof, please, when is the appropriate time to use mixed method design? This question, please, there will be a day for mixed methods. You can reserve your question for that time.
Exactly, Doc.
Okay, so these are the questions that we have. And I would want to invite Prof. Anama Mensah to share his thoughts with us. So, Prof, you can unmute and then.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Charles, for the presentation. Yeah, I think this has been a very useful, presentation for our students. Students, you must remember that you are learning the rubrics, you are learning the ropes to research. And it's so important, that you continue to participate in this. Charles has given you quite a lot of information that you need to look at. But I just want to make a comment on one of them, which he emphasized, but it looks like questions were coming. Issues about, do you state hypothesis? Do you have to state alternative? Would you have to state, which one do you state? Should you leave it off and then just have research questions and so on? As a beginner learning, you go through the whole process. You state your research questions. You state if it's a quantitative study that requires hypothesis statement. You state the hypothesis in the null form, in the alternative forms, and carry out your study. When you grow, in the process, when you continue to work in the process, you may delete one line, one stage of it, and then continue to work on it because you have really internalized the system. And therefore, you can always, do a shortcut. But as a learner, as a beginning person, when you're writing your thesis, I think everybody wants to see that you have gone through the steps one by one, so that at the end of the day, you can really, appreciate the processes. Because one day you'll also be teaching somebody like this. And if you haven't gone through the process yourself, and you want a shortcut for it, sometimes it may create a problem for you. So I think that this has been a wonderful presentation, and there are more to it. And the presenter said, Charles said that, there's a follow-up to all this, I think it's very, very important, So if people are going to, it looks like most of the research done is not even, experimental, pure experimental, it's probably quasi-experimental or just, survey, and so on. But we want to encourage students to also, learn how to conduct pure research, where there's total control of the events. When developing vaccine and so on, you have to control the system. You can't just do to say that, oh, I'm going to give it to the people to see if they will be cured by it, or they can be resistant to any infection and so on. You have to, do a controlled study, and we need to learn the control study, so that when, the results come, there's no question that there's a causal effect, that you are talking about. So I think it's a very useful for you. Continue to probably go to the website, and wherever it is, for YouTube, and get it, and then use it to revise whatever you have done. I think it will help you. Remember, you are the learner, and you are learning the ropes. So gradually, you go through the entire process. No shortcuts. Go through the entire process and make sure that you understand every step of the process. And I think in future, probably you may find that if you're doing truly quantitative research, you may have to have somebody mention the issue of the philosophy behind it. Yes, it's very, very critical. And most people, we use the Habermas system, to do that. And so as we go along, more things will come. Maybe workshops will even come, when they are dealing with, for example, regression analysis or ANOVA, and then you do actual workshop, to ensure that you get the skills for carrying out your own study. So thank you all for coming. I don't know the number of students who are on this platform today, but I hope that the number has increased, more than what we used to have, So thank you very much, Ima, for also being the man on the stage, ensuring that things are put in place. And thank you, Charles, once again,
thank you, Prof,
for this presentation. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Prof, for your closing remarks. This is an announcement to the students of the session we had on plagiarism. I think that most of the students asked for a repeat, and we said we're going to make it practical. So it will come on Thursday, this Thursday, 26th. And the facilitator has given some instructions to us. Before we come, we should all try to download the Zotero onto our laptops. And then he's giving some steps to follow before Thursday. The adverts will be on the university's website soon. So students should do well to download it before Thursday, so we can have some practice sessions. I have shared that also with the information with the student leadership, the grassroots leadership. So for those who haven't had it yet, we will be meeting again on Thursday to have a practice session on the Zotero. So thank you so much, and thank everybody for coming, especially Professor Charles Assuah for the wonderful presentation. I think we have read some of the compliments that the students are giving. So thank you so much. The wonderful presentation that you have made. God bless you. And God bless everyone. Thank you so much. So bye till next week.
Bye.
Thursday.
Okay, bye.